status of a great power eventually. China, of course, is already a great power. India and others aspiring to be. So the question is that enough? Can you ever be a great power without having a say on global rulemaking? So these are kind of softer aspects of strategic thinking that need to be developed and advanced a lot, especially in Asia, Africa, Latin America. And that is where, you can say all you like about economic growth, but the rules and the governing mechanisms and institutions that underpin international order are still the ones that we have been receiving from the global north. Right? So China may be powerful, it certainly is, and it can, in many regions of the world, it can claim to be the real superpower and not the United States. But the problem is, has it formulated its own, as I said, phrases or rules or informal mechanisms that govern the order? This is a big challenge. Let me go from R to P. Well, I would say that countries need to have a consistent internal decision first, whether in principle they are in favor of humanitarian intervention or whether they in principle they are opposed to this concept. What often happens is opportunistic case-by-case voting patterns. So if you look at India, there have been times in the past, twice in fact, when Iran had come up at the IAEA and India voted against Iran twice, right? And that would suggest that the calculus is based on pragmatism and give and take. And it was revealed later on that it was under Western pressure that India had voted twice against Iran for it to be taken up to the UN Security Council. That same India is now siding with the West, siding with the Arab League on Syria. Where is the consistency? If they have taken a position saying, we are opposed to this whole R2P doctrine and its inconsistent application, then you can understand, right? But what often happens is states, especially non-great powers, don't have the luxury, they think they don't have the luxury to stick to a position because diplomacy is, requires flexibility and opportunistic behavior on the spot rather than coming to the table saying, this is my position. Right? So they believe that they need wiggle room to maneuver from time to time. And all that can only happen if you don't come up with a foreordained position. Right? So many of these states actually vote on a case-by-case basis. So tomorrow if there's a new resolution on R2P somewhere else, let's say Sudan or something, it's possible that India may vote differently. So you cannot really read a pattern here. What I'm saying is that eventually, if you want to be recognized as a great power, or for the region as a whole to have a higher say in rule making, they will need to come up with not hardened positions, which are not amenable to bargaining, but principles, rules, norms that they believe need to be imposed or need to metastasize in the entire international order. So I come up with an idea, and here it is, it's spreading, and more nation states are now accepting that idea. Right? So we need to reach that level of maturity. Mr. Mohan Guruswamy is here, so I will not hold up too long. So R2P, as I said, is a huge challenge for Asian countries. That's one of the big questions. Even on issues such as the environment, you see huge divisions. The island nations and the small island nations have been betrayed by the larger emerging economies of the global south. And you see this huge variegation within the global south now between the so-called upwardly mobile states like the BRICS group and the ones who remain lower down the order in terms of power. So there is a disconnect there. And again, the global south has been unable to come up with any kind of coordinated position because although it's not as bad as trade, where in the morning we learned that every single issue, there can be an issue-based coalition, right? It's not as disorganized or chaotic as that on the environment, because some countries have consistently argued one point. But still, it is at odds with the positions of others. So, for global governance, you need to be seen to be acting in greater public good, not just in your own narrow national interests. Because that's the whole premise of global governance. It's not happening in the case of a number of countries who, again, believe that if you grow economically, if you're pursuing your so-called, this much abused term, supreme national interests, then you're doing well for yourself. But the discourse of global governance actually says that you should frame proposals and actions as if they were in the general public good, not just in your own national interest, right? So the failure of Asian states to argue that whatever they're doing or proposing or arguing is in the greater public good of the entire community of nations is a deficiency. And it is not only a matter of rhetoric, because sometimes you have to show that you're actually taking up these so-called responsibilities, right? As the old saying goes, power comes with responsibilities. And if you're accumulating more and more power, but you're not able to show that you're taking on these greater responsibilities, then there's clearly a credibility gap, right? How can you become a rule maker if you're just following your own national interests? Why would anybody else accept your proposals to be in any way benefiting them, right? Let me move on to a third and final point about Asia's deficiencies in global governance. This is the realm of peacemaking, something that is the origin of diplomacy, as you know. Peacemaking, the ability to mediate and facilitate talks that bring political solutions to armed conflicts. Peacemaking is often an understudied element of soft power. Yesterday we heard a lot about soft power, but I didn't see peacemaking being mentioned at all, right? Soft power, if it's only about exporting your culture and your music and your food and all that, I don't think it is sufficient at the political level. Just because people are eating more Balti food in Britain doesn't make India more attractive for British policymakers, right? What Asian states need to be doing, and which again I find a major deficiency, is their ability to offer their good offices to resolve major conflicts that are not necessarily confined to their own regions. By which I am referring back to the tradition in India, for example, of the 1950s, where Nehru was a colossus on the global stage, even though India lacked the economic and military might that it has today. And at that time, if you just remember the major global flashpoints, Korean War, how did it come to an end? India mediating. Suez War, 1956, how did it come to an end? Eisenhower and Nehru, they formed what is called the Elder Statesman Club. And so Nehru pulled back Nasser, Eisenhower pulled back Israel and Britain and France from the brink, right? Even the war in Vietnam. So Laos, Cambodia, wherever you had armistices and ceasefires and all this, India was a major player. Today, the Indians believe, the Indian establishment believes that it doesn't need to do all that, it doesn't have leverage over these conflicts, we really can't make an effort. But just think to what has happened to countries like Turkey or Brazil. Look at their diplomatic transformation under visionary leadership, especially during President Lula's time, and Turkey, Erdogan and his foreign minister, Davutoglu, have been very, very proactive. It doesn't require leverage. I mean, of course, in some cases, the Turks have offered their good offices in peacemaking and have failed, but at least they made the attempt. What does Brazil have to do with Iran? Very less. Brazil tried to solve the Iranian imbroglio 2 years ago through a joint nuclear swap proposal with Turkey, right? Why couldn't India or China do that? Um, China, I would still say, has assets and has leverage, and probably can do more, but it hasn't done enough. But certainly, I would say it is still ahead of India in being more proactive. For example, last week you may have heard that the crisis in this Kordofan area of Sudan um, is being referred to China for its good offices, because China has relations both with the South and North Sudan equally strong, right? So here is a concrete case where a major emerging power could possibly play a peacemaking role. I don't know whether they're up to the task. This is new terrain for them. Look at all the major conflicts in the world. Who are the mediators? It's usually US, European Union, and the UN Secretary General's office, and some regional powers, right? The idea of an Asian state resolving armed conflicts outside Asia or far away from its borders is alien to this generation of Asian leaders. So again, that is a deficiency, because if you don't fill the space, then it is going to be the Sarkozys of the world who are going to claim that they are resolving world problems, when you know that they are not, right? In fact, it invites accusations of neo-colonialism which are pretty much justified. So, if you leave the space for peacemaking, which is a major issue for global governance, unattended, and if Asia doesn't have a seat, Asian countries don't play this positive and cooperative role of bringing together armed parties together and resolving their issues, then Asia will be left out, not only economically but also politically, in terms of influence, right? So again, it requires, I think, a mindset change. We have been wary about global governance. We have seen it as some kind of, attempted push by the West to infiltrate our societies and to question our models of governance, and we have been defensive about it throughout. And unless this changes, whether we like it or not, global governance, the discourse is moving ahead and is impacting political spaces around the world, creating regime changes, peace agreements, and and climate change negotiations. All these are happening often without the positive contributions of Asian countries. And I think it's a time for a reality check. And my argument is basically that we have to formulate our own alternatives to some of these hot phrases like R2P, or even traditional practices like mediation. We have to come up with our own proposals for resolving conflicts. We have to come up with our own ideas about how to break the logjam on climate change. Even on trade, of course, trade is of course more complex, because sometimes the ones who are obstructing are those from the global north. But some of what I'm saying is that global governance is a term that's not going away. It just does not mean that just because there are some emerging economies and who've been accommodated into the G20, and that now we have started to becoming more influential rule making. The fact is that even at the G20 level, look at issues like financial regulation, global financial regulation. What is the contribution of China or India or Brazil to this whole discussion? Have we come up with robust proposals that will ensure simultaneous coordinated global financial regulation? I don't think we have. So again, be it R2B, be it peacemaking, be it financial regulation, we have just not been able to formulate enough ideas, catchphrases, and we have not been able to set the agenda. And I hope that the diplomacy of Asia and of Africa and Latin America will change in the direction where they have dedicated people in their policy planning divisions, in foreign policy establishments, who will say, you know what, we are losing out on this. We should not be satisfied with economic growth and military modernization, or with selling our culture and feeling happy about our expanding soft power. At the end of the day, if you are not a global problem solver, your soft power is not growing very much. Right? How do we become global problem solvers? How do we think beyond our own domestic and regional interests and say that I am a vector, I am an agent for positive change in international society at large? That is a challenge. Thank you.